In the previous tutorial video, we talked about how you can declare variables which are placeholders for a particular type. And the type is simply all the allowable values that you can store in the particular variable. Okay, for example, let's review what we said about this particular declaration over here. We are declaring over here integer I is the name, to be of this particular type called int, which means for this particular box, which is has the name I, we can only put in integers. Okay, so now we're gonna follow the same principle over here. Now, rather than having int over here, we're gonna say this box can store string values only. So how can we do that? We just gotta change the type over here. The rest of the syntax will just be the same. Okay, let's see how we can do that. So now, in order to declare, we're gonna say the type of the variable. So string is actually a type you can use. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about why the S over here must be capitalized. If there's actually a very important concept over here, something about classes, but we don't have to worry about it for now. Just remember, whenever you talk about string, it must be capitalized. Okay. So string is a type, and then let's say S over here. Okay, we're declaring S to be a placeholder, where you can put any string values. You can put, for example, A over here, or you can put B over here, or you can put C over here. However, can you put 23 over here? No. This is wrong, because 23 is not a string, it's a number. Okay, make sure the types are consistent. Okay, so now we can simply just give an initial value it is assigned to initially, for example, A. Okay, semicolon, and then we can reassign different value to the same box. So we can say after this, S is reassigned to B. Okay, it's basically the same pattern as we saw before. You can see I initially is 5 and then reassigned to 7. Okay, the same idea. Okay, so now let's just illustrate this with some more examples. So that'll be it for this video. Okay, so now let's go to Eclipse, and then I want to create a new class over here. Okay, right click as usual on the source and say new, and then class. And let's say string variables. And then make sure you click on the box for the main method here and say finish. Okay, I want to give you the example like this. Let's say, how about this? Or what about just first name and last name? Okay, so now let's say string first name is something. Empty string. Oh, by the way, for string, if you simply got a pair of quotes with nothing inside, that's simply empty string, nothing there. Okay, and the way we name the variable, by the way, which I forgot to mention in the previous video, is unlike the case for the class name, which should be all capitalized, but for the variable name, only the first word should not be capitalized. Okay, just some naming convention. Okay, first name, and also last name would be like this. Okay, first name and last name. Okay, and we know that the formal convention for displaying this will be last name, comma, first name. Okay, so now what we can do is we can say system.out dot per line. Okay, so now we can say over here person 1. Okay, person 1. You know what? Let me make it even more interesting for you. Okay, and there's a very good case study for you. Okay, integer I is simply equal to 1. Okay, person over here, and hopefully you can see how things work. Person plus I plus, okay, person 1. Okay, and then we're gonna do last name, okay, plus first name, last name and first name. Okay, I believe that will work. Okay, so now let's say initially, how about this? I start with 0 because person is 0 simply is just empty string and empty string. Okay, now right click on this, and then we're gonna say run as Java application. Okay, person 0, he simply empty string followed by empty string. Okay, it doesn't really it doesn't really, I just want to illustrate this for empty string for you. Okay, now let's trace the program very carefully. Okay, so now up to now what we have is something like this, right? First name and last name. So that means we got 2 boxes for string. Okay, so one is called first name. The other one is called last name. And we also got another variable over here, which is integer. Okay, and by the way, for first name, last name, initially it's simply just empty string and empty string initially, right? And also we have another box for I. That's for integer only. Initially it's simply just 0, right? Like that. Okay, that's kind of the conceptual model you should really build in order to trace the program. So up to now, that's why when you try to print this line over here, when you say person verbatim plus the value for whatever that is stored in I, that is 0. And then last name, in this case, will be empty string followed by comma followed by first name, which is empty string. That's exactly what you see. Okay, so now let me do the following. Remember, we cannot, the rule that we talked about before, you can only declare variables only once. Okay, don't forget. Now, what I would do is, let me just go back to here so we can keep tracing the program. So now what I would do is I'm going to change the first name and last name, and I'm going to make it person 1. Okay, let's say this. I can say first name is assigned to, let's say, let me just give you our name, Hyang. Okay, and then last name is reassigned to Kang. Okay, and then what I would do is I can also, I is assigned, reassigned to, and here I can put any numbers alike. In this case, I can say I plus 1, which means I'm going to calculate exactly what I plus 1 is. In this case, it would be 0 plus 1, which is 1, and then reassign I to be 1. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about arithmetic a little bit later in the class, but hopefully you can see the simple cases like this. Okay, that means after these, what we will get is like this. Okay, so now basically for the first name, it's going to be Hyang over here. Okay, of course it's a new string over here, and then over here for the last name it's going to be Kang over here. Kang. And then there's a last name, and then what about the I? I is going, okay, I plus 1, the right hand side over here, the I value over here is the current value that is stored in this placeholder, which is 0. 0 plus 1 would be 1, and 1 is stored back to the same box, which means it's 1 over here. So that means what will be the output if we try to do something similar. Okay, so now let's do exactly this line here. Let's copy and paste. Okay, so now what will be the output? Well, make an anticipation before I execute it. It should be person, the current value for I, which is 1, followed by colon, and then followed by last name, Gang over here, and then comma, and then the first name, which we just reassigned to Hyang. Okay, now let's try to execute it. So now that's exactly what we get, right? Person 0 and then person 1. Okay, hopefully you get an idea. Try to study this example very carefully and see how we mix the variables and literals together, and also got variables for integers and also variables for string. Okay, let me do one more. What about person 2? First name would be, let's say, Jihei over here, and then let's say last name would be Park. Okay, and then I is assigned to I plus 1, for example, right? So now I'll trace it before I try to execute the code. Okay, so now what would this do? So that means the first name over here is going to be replaced by Jihei. So what I will do is I will replace the first name over here is going to be Jihei. And then I have also last name is going to be replaced by Park. And then what about I? So now I, the value here, The right hand side is going to be I plus 1. What's the current value that is stored in I? Well, 1. So that means 1 plus 1 will be 2, and store 2 back to the same placeholder, the same variable, which means this will be replaced by 2, which means we're going to have person 2 park, comma, Jihei. Okay, that's what we'll get. And now we're going to copy exactly this line over here, and then what we will get is exactly this. You can see. Now let me highlight this. Let me just tell you the remark. Okay. Okay, lines over here. Oh, by the way, there's one more thing I want to show you, which I forgot. Okay, and if sometimes you want to write multiple lines of comments, there's another way to do it. Okay, you can simply say / star, hit enter. So now you can just write as many lines as you like. That's also a comment. So there are two ways to write a comment: either double / or you can in between like this. Okay. So now what we can do is we can say remark. Lines 8, 13, and 18 are identical. However, at runtime, they produce different outputs to the console. This is because they depend on values of variables which are changed at lines. For example, you can see over here we changed the variable values in 5, 6, 7. Okay, let me just lines 5 to 7, and also here we changed them in line number 10 to 12. 10 to 12, and okay, let me just make it a little bit better. And also from line 15 to 17, and 15 to 17, right? You can see when we talk about I and last name and first name over here for the first time, it refers to whatever value that's here. Okay, when we talk about I, last name, and first name here, it talk about the latest reassignments over here. And then when we talk about I, last name, and first name again, that's the latest reassignment. Okay, hopefully you can understand this remark. It's really important. Okay, so now execute it again. Okay, that's what we have. Okay, so here we got person 0, empty string, comma, empty string, person 1, Gang Hyang, and person 2, Park Jihei. Okay, so that's what we have. So now what we want to do is one more example. Okay, a little bit more challenging example, but I want you to be challenged. Okay, so now what I want to do is to create a new class. Okay, and I tell you what I want to do. First of all, let's do new, and then we do class over here. Okay, I would say swap 2 strings. Okay, hopefully the name actually suggests pretty much what we're gonna do. Okay, it's gonna be a very simple program, only 2 or 3 lines, but I want you to see exactly why the first version I'm gonna provide is not going to work, but the second version with some fix will actually work. Okay, we illustrate quite many things about variables, initialization, and reassignments. Okay, make sure you click on the main over here and say finish. Okay, so now let's say this. Okay, make it simple for you. Not integer. Let's do string. Okay, but you can also do the similar example with integer as well. So string, let's say over here, let's say person 1 is, let's say Alan. Okay, and string person 2 is Tom. So we got Alan, we got Tom. Okay, this is something we can certainly visualize by ourselves. Okay, let's see exactly what's going to happen over here. So we got person 1 and person 2. That means over here, person 1, and we have person 2. Okay, and then person 1 initially is going to be Alan. Let me put Alan over here. And then person 2 is going to be Tom. Okay, now let me tell you what I want to achieve. Want to achieve So now, let me write in a different color. So this is expected output from my program. I want to swap between these two persons. So I still have person 1 and person 2, the two variables. However, person 1 should now be Tom, and person 2 should now be Alan. Okay, so this is what I would like to achieve. Okay, so now you can pause the video now, and now can you write just about a few lines over here. I wouldn't tell you how many lines you should really write. And I want you to write a few lines over here such that person 1 and person 2 started initially like this is going to be swapped between the two names like this. How would you do it? Okay, pause the video and then play it again when you have solution and compare with mine. Okay, I presume you think about your solution. So now let's try to see. I will show you a version that wouldn't work. Okay, I'll show you something that might be very intuitive, but unfortunately it wouldn't work. What if I simply do the following? Okay, now we want to swap. What if I simply say person 1 is assigned to person 2 and person 2 is assigned to person 1? Is this going to work? Well, without too much prejudice, why don't we simply test it out? Okay, the way to test it out is do something like this. System.out.println before the swap. Okay, actually, you know what? Remember print? Okay, I'll just show you what you have learned from the previous video. System.out.print. Person 1 is, okay, and then person 1. Okay. Okay. And, okay, let me just copy this line over here. And then person 2 is, well, person 2, of course. Okay. Person 1 is person 1. Okay, you can see the person 1 here is a literal. Person 2 over here is also literal, but the person 1 here and the person 2 here depend on what's really currently stored in person 1 and person 2 variables. Okay, just make sure you understand that. Okay, I don't need this. Okay, I can add a period over here as well. Okay, so now I want to know if the swap will be done. Okay, so now this is before the swap, and now after the swap, I can say after the swap, person 1 is whatever. Okay, now I should expect person 1 here should not be Alan anymore. It should be Tom. And person 2 here should not be Tom anymore. It should be Alan. Okay, if this is really the case, that means these two lines are considered as correctly implementing what I really want to achieve, which is over here. If it is not the case, that means these two lines are simply incorrect. Okay, let's see exactly what we can do. Okay, so now let's just execute the program here. Right click, and then you can say run as Java application. Oh, you know what? Let me do one more thing. I forgot. Okay, you can ignore the output just for now. Okay, I want to put ln print line and also ln. So we got two separate lines. And okay, you know what? Actually, that would be fine. Okay, so now do it again. Before the swap, person 1 is Alan and person 2 is Tom. After the swap, person 1 is Tom and person 2 is not Alan but Tom. Apparently this is wrong because it's inconsistent with what we're expecting here. Rather than Alan here, it's actually Tom. So we got Tom and Tom. That's not good. Okay, so now let's see exactly why this would be the case. Okay, so now you will understand very well why this particular three print statements here will give you this line over here, right? Because now before the swap, okay, that comes from before the swap over here comes from this particular print statement over here, and then you say person 1 comes from person 1 over here is, okay, right? So now Alan over here comes from the current value for person 1, which is Alan, okay? And then the Tom over here comes from the value for that is currently stored in person 2, which is Tom. Okay, now let's trace the program by executing faithfully line by line. Remember sequential execution. We execute one line after another. Okay? What's going to happen if you try to execute this line? I'm going to put these two lines exactly on the iPad. Okay? And then we'll talk about it. Okay? What we got over here is person 1 is reassigned to person 2, semicolon. And then person 2 is assigned to person 1. Okay, so now let's do line by line. When we do this line over here, okay, what that means is when we refer to this particular person 2, we refer to whatever value that is currently stored in person 2, right? In this case, it's Tom. And then we are trying to store Tom into this particular variable, which is person 1, the placeholder. That means we're going to replace Alan over here by Tom. So far, it seems to be fine. Okay, however, what's going to happen is, most importantly, so now when we get to the second line over here, right? So now, when we talk about person 1, I think what we really meant to really refer to should be Alan, right? But Alan has been already replaced over here. So Alan is not there anymore. So person 1 over here refers to the current value that has been just replaced, which is Tom. That is why we're going to store Tom over here into person 2. That means we're going to replace this by the same value, which is Tom. So that's why we actually got Tom and Tom, right? That is why over here, when you talk about person 1 over here, it's simply just Tom, because person 1 here is Tom. And then person 2 over here is also Tom, simply because it's still Tom. Okay, now it's really important for you to really appreciate why these two lines of code is actually wrong implementation. Okay, see that first. Okay, this is wrong implementation. Okay, so now you don't want to make really, I want to keep that so you will remember. So now let me rename the class. How about that? Right click on this and then refactor and say rename. Okay, now let's say swap two strings. I would say run. Okay, make it very explicit for you. And finish. And finish here. Okay, now let me duplicate it and I'll make the correct version for you and trace it, and then we are done. Okay, so now let me right click on this and then I will say copy, and then I'm gonna say right click again and then I will say paste. And now rather than wrong two, I'm gonna say string swap two string. Let's say correct. Okay, correct and wrong. Let's go to the correct version. Let me just close this, close everything, and then double click on the correct version. So now I want to have a correct implementation. And what should I put over here, right? So now let's now, of course, the way we compare before and after will be the same. It's only about how we manipulate the variables that's gonna matter, right? So now let me just go back to iPad over here, and then by the way, let me just make it explicit for you. So this is wrong implementation. Okay, so now let me just create a new page for you. But before I do that, let me save a little bit of drawing. So let me just copy this guy here. So the same requirements as before. So this is what we want to achieve, right? And now let me just start it up by saying, so we still got an initial setup. So we got person 1 and person 2, Alan and Tom, right? Okay, so now we got person 1. And then we got person 2. Okay, and we got Alan. And again, we got Tom. Okay, so now what would the correct implementation look like? Let's learn from the wrong implementation. The wrong implementation from the previous page over here, you can see that after the very first line over here, after this very first line, if you look at what's the current value for person 1, it's actually being correctly replaced by Tom. That part is okay. However, when we were trying to actually do the second line over here, the problem is the person 1 is not referring to Alan here anymore. It's just gone. Okay, so that's the problem, right? So now it would be nice if we can somehow maybe put Alan somewhere else before it is replaced. Basically, that's an insight into the solution. Okay, so that means before we try to replace person 1, which means before we try to execute this line of replacement, we want to store maybe this value here somewhere else so that we can use it later. Okay, that's the insight into it. Okay, conceptually, how does it work? What we're going to do is, conceptually, we want to create an intermediate variable, just another variable. Okay, I'll put it here. So let me just use red over here. Let me just put another box over here conceptually, but I'm going to do that programmatically with you together. Let me call it temp. Okay, let's see exactly how this is going to work. So now, in order to make sure we don't really lose Alan over here after the replacement. So what I would do, first of all, I'm going to say temp is assigned to person 1. Okay, so that means after this one here, Alan is going to be duplicated into here. Because over here, you can see that person 1 at the moment is simply just Alan. And then we're copying this into temp. So that means we got Alan here, right? So far so good. Okay, so now we got duplicates of Alan, but that's okay because this will be replaced in just a moment. Okay, and then we can simply do very similar to what we did before. And now after this, we can say person 1 is assigned to person 2. So now, let's see what's going to happen here. You can see person 2 over here is simply Tom over here. And we're going to reuse that to replace whatever that's in person 1. Person 1 is over here. So that means Alan over here is going to be replaced by Tom. However, we don't have to worry as before because temp still holds a copy of Alan. That's why duplicates will actually help us in this correct solution. Okay, one more time. So what we will do over here is we're going to do one more. So rather than saying person 2 is assigned to person 1, which wouldn't work in the previous solution, what we will do is we're going to say person 2 is assigned to temp. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Basically over here, so what we will get is, over here, what will be the value for temp? Well, it's being duplicated as Alan. So that means it's Alan over here. I'm going to copy Alan over to person. Replace this by Alan. So that means after these 3 lines of code, which is deemed to be correct, which I'm going to show you, that's going to achieve person 1 should be Tom and person 2 should be Alan. Let's verify this. Okay, so now I'm claiming that this should be the correct implementation. Okay, that's the notes. Okay, so please just follow that conceptually before we program it. Okay, so now what I would do is, for the correct implementation, I'll declare an extra variable. Temp is assigned to person 1. Okay, so now I will just say this. Temp stores Alan. And then I can say, okay, so, oh, by the way, you can see that temp is actually just a new variable. That's why I got to declare that, okay? And now for person 1 and person 2, they already exist. I don't redeclare them, okay? So now I would say over here, temp is assigned to person 1. As we explained before, temp is going to be storing Alan. Oh, beg your pardon? I'm repeating myself. Okay, let me do it again. So now temp stores Alan, which is over here. So now we can safely do the replacement. And what we'll do is we'll say person 1 is assigned to person 2. And now person 1 stores whatever that was used to be in person 2, which was Tom. Okay, that means we are gonna replace Alan by Tom. Okay, over here. Okay, the orange part. Person 1 stores Tom. Okay, notice that at this point, okay, person 1 is already replaced by Tom. Okay, right? You can see that it's already replaced by Tom. So it cannot be used to actually store back to person 2, right? So that's why we're going to use the temp. So we have to use temp in order to complete the swap. So I would say person 1 over here, person 2 over here is assigned to temp. Okay, you can see that I always put a semicolon here, right? Just don't forget. Okay, so now this one here, person 2 will be assigned to whatever temp is, which is Alan. Okay, so now this will be the 3 lines that we have to implement in order to correctly get an output. Okay, so now let's see exactly if that will do. Okay, so now we used to get a wrong output from the wrong version. Okay, let's see the correct version. Right click and say run as Java application. You can see now, yep, before the swap, Alan and Tom. After the swap, we got Tom and Alan. Why? Replay exactly how I illustrated over here. Okay, for the 3-line program. So now, exercise for you. Okay, try to do that by yourself. Okay. Declare 2 integers x and y and swap them. Okay, and use the same pattern over here to display the before the swap and after the swap output. Okay, try to do this exercise. That will you work basically the same way, except that the declaration part is going to be different, and also the value you can assign to the variable will be also different because they are different types. Okay, hopefully you can see from this video here, we try to illustrate different examples for you so you can really appreciate that you always should really think about conceptually what's going on with a mental model about placeholder for variables. And then you can try to see why a particular implementation over here is actually wrong. If you don't know how to trace the program, like how I did it before, like this, it wouldn't be so easy for you to understand why your program is not right and need improvement. Okay, so really study this video very carefully, and now if you think you're ready, so now we can in the next video show you exactly how you can use reading input from the user and do more general programming.